This week on Merchants of Change, we've got John Bonamego. John coached for over 20 years in both the NFL and college football. In the NFL, he worked for the Lions, the Rams, the Jaguars, the Packers, the Saints, and the Miami Dolphins. In college, he made stops at Michigan, Maine, Iowa State, and was the head coach at his alma mater, Central Michigan. After coaching, John transitioned to sales, where he currently works as a BDR for BSN Sports, a one-stop solution for team apparel, equipment, and training needs. Here he is, John Bonamego.
I'm JR Butler, co-founder and CEO of the Shift Group, and you're listening to Merchants of Change. This is a podcast about transferring the skills and behaviors we acquire as athletes and military veterans into becoming a professional salesperson. Each week, we'll introduce you to a top performer who will help us understand how they became professional merchants of change.
What's up, kid? Today on the show, we got John Bonamego. John, thank you so much for joining us, man. I'm really excited.
JR, it's an honor and a privilege. Thanks for having me today.
It's great. It's great to have you. So, John, for a little bit of context for you and for anybody that's tuning into the show for the first time, we started our company Shift Group a few years ago to help former elite athletes and military veterans successfully transition into sales careers. And we started our show to really expose the type of people that we work with to folks that are a little further along in their journey on their transition. And, you know, every guest we've had is a former athlete, former veteran, former coach like yourself that's gone on to, you know, make that transition into sales. And what we like to do is kind of start with the background around, you know, the athletics, get into the transition a little bit, and then leave our audience with some life lessons that you've picked up along the way on sales. So, sound like a good plan for you?
It's outstanding.
Amazing. Well, you know, John, I was reading your coaching resume, and just incredibly impressive, so there's a saying, I'm a hockey player, but I was a high school football player, but I went on really to have most of my success in hockey, and we have this saying in hockey, my brother is one of these, it's called being a suitcase, and it's when you travel around for all these different jobs, and I think you've lived in multiple states and worked in multiple places, so this is going to be a tough question, but I have a feeling you have some bullets for us. But when you look back at your incredible coaching career, what are some of your favorite memories from your coaching career?
Well, I think, you know, being named the head coach at my alma mater, Central Michigan, is definitely a huge highlight. You know, it was always a goal of mine to have the opportunity to lead my own program, to develop a culture, and to have the opportunity to do that at one's alma mater is very special. Only lasted 4 years, but I like to say that 3 of those were great. And you know, it's like anything else in life. You roll up your sleeves, you do the very best you can, and you know, a lot of things are out of your control, so you have to really focus on and dial in on the things that you can control. Be able to look at yourself in the mirror every single day and know that you did the very best. And if you do that, you can live your life with no regrets. And you know, that's the stage where I'm at right now. The other part that I would say, and you hit on it, is, you know, I was able to stay employed, stay afloat. I think the single thing that I'm most proud of in my career, of all the head coaches that I worked from, going back from, you know, University of Maine to Lehigh to Army, in the NFL, where I worked for 6 different franchises and 3 of them twice. I only had one boss, one head coach that I had a prior relationship with. So I'm not one of those guys that, you know, rode someone else's coattails. I had to do it. I had to develop and build my own reputation, and was able to advance and really stay afloat, for lack of probably a better word, based on the merits of the work that and the product that I was able to put on the field and the relationships that I was able to develop along the way.
That's amazing. And relationships, as a son of a coach, I know how important and critical that is to that experience, both on your staff, the athletic administration, but I think most importantly, the student athletes that you impact. So.
I think it's paramount. I think it's the single most important thing that you do is your reputation and the relationships. I think that isn't just in athletics, but it's also in the business world. I mean, I think trust is one of the top pillars. I've always heard that, it's gained in drops, but lost in buckets. And, man, you're looking to develop, powerful, productive relationships based on trust, and not just in your, in your business, but in your personal life as well.
100%. Now, I was reading through the notes from your pre-show chat, and I saw a call out of getting that first call to the NFL, and then also being part of the reopening of the Superdome in New Orleans. So I'd love for you to just give a little color to those two bullets.
Yeah,
there, those are unbelievable stories.
The first call, getting a job offer in the NFL. I mean, again, it's. We all think that you're, chasing jobs is what you need to do. I think you have to stay vigilant. You have to stay connected. You have to stay, you have to market yourself to some degree. But in my experience, it's always been the opportunities have found me. And, being a Boston guy, look, my first call came from Tom Coughlin, and it was with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and it was completely out of the blue, and it was for an interview. He made that clear. He said, but the funny thing about that, and it's a great story, was Coach Coughlin, after, and my relationship with him now is obviously much different than it was back then when I was, a really young coach, and, he was trying to figure out if I was the right fit. But he really hated the hiring process, and he didn't like to waste time. So he made me promise him, JR, on the phone that if I, he said, if you come down on this interview and we click and I offer you the job, I want to know that you're going to accept it. He goes, I'm not interested in any leverage games and all that stuff, which, I had no intentions of anything of the like, but I told him, I said, yeah, coach, obviously, if you offer me the job, I'm coming. And the other one you alluded to was the reopening of the Superdome, after Katrina in the Monday night game where Steve Gleason blocked the punt. We also blocked the field goal in that game. That was definitely a highlight moment of my career, not just because we had a good game and we won, but for what it meant to the city. The atmosphere in the stadium that night was as close to a Super Bowl as you could get, probably better because it was a home game, and Super Bowls you kind of get a mixture of crowds. I wouldn't ever describe a Super Bowl crowd as being like a raucous crowd, but you had all the media there. Look, the other Bono was in the house. The YouTube. I'm the Me Too Bono, but Green Day was there. I mean, it was Monday Night Football, and it was just a phenomenal night. But really more so because of what it meant to the city of New Orleans. I mean, of all the places we've been in, throughout our travels, and we've enjoyed every single one of them, New Orleans will always be a special place for the Bonamegos. The people there, especially getting there with Sean Payton 6 months after Katrina, to see firsthand what, the devastation. And look, what we all saw on television only told a very small part of the story. To really know it and feel it, you had to drive through those areas, which, I had to do or we had to do every game day when we traveled to the stadium. I mean, you could see the watermarks on the buildings that, where they were underwater. Um, but great people. We still have a lot of very good friendships outside of football from the people there. They just took us in. They made us family, and it'll always be a second home for us.
This is where like sports transcends society and is like so important, and there's certain games that you remember as a fan, and I think like that game is up there with the first baseball game at Yankee Stadium after 9/11, the first Red Sox game at Fenway after the marathon bombing, like just the connectivity and the community of sports and athletics and how that can really bring people together. It's emotional at the end of the day, and that's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that story. That's amazing. So Coach Bono, how would your like coaching staffs, how would they describe you as a coach?
I think organized. I think that's the key to everything. I mean, if you're not organized, you can't really expect to have success, at least for long term. You might have it in small spurts, but to be able to, be successful consistently over the long haul, you have to be organized, detailed. I think, I believe I was a good teammate, good listener, hard worker, and man, you got to always maintain a great sense of humor. And so, I'm a little bit of a practical joker. I'm very well known and remembered for my ability to tell stories. My stories you wouldn't know where they were coming from until the very end when I tied in, but there was always a message there, and it was always, had to do with teamwork or becoming a pro, how pros conduct themselves. And, I carried that even at Central Michigan. I think when you think of the word professional, I would say, guys, just because you're paid to play the game, that doesn't mean you're a pro, and you understand that from your background. And I don't think it's ever too soon for an athlete to start conducting themselves as a professional. It just means that you have a purposeful intensity to everything that you do, that you're process driven. So, again, I'm trying to fit 10 pounds of bologna in a 5-pound bag here, but I'd say those are the key highlights that if I were going to describe myself, or how I hope at least I was perceived, it would be all of those.
I love I love that pulling on that professionalism string. My dad, when we were little, my dad used to say to us, like, listen, there's a lot of kids that play hockey, but there's not a lot of hockey players, and there's a difference, yep. Right? So like, I think that applies to, and really what he meant was like, are you gonna approach this like a pro? Like, are you gonna take it seriously?
Right.
Are you gonna be dialed in? Are you gonna do the work, in the off season, away from the rink, all those things? Because like anybody can show up to practice and work hard. That's like table stakes, right? Like that's to get in the door. But You're not really a pro until you like live it, breathe it, and like it becomes really who you want to be. So I love that.
And I think the key ingredient with that, I think, or at least what makes it a lot easier, is passion for what you do. If you love what you do, I've never had a job, because coaching was what I loved to do. I loved the game. I wanted to be involved with the game. And so it was never work for me. The late George DeLeon, who was very, told me, he said, Bono, you don't get paid to coach football. You love it. We all do. You get paid to, the money's for your family so that your wife can put up with the other ladies at the bus stop when they're talking shit about you on the radio. But yeah, I mean, and the same thing, if you're a player trying to develop yourselves, and you love the game, and you want to be as good as you can be, then you're that sponge. I think it comes down to self-awareness as well, and knowing where you realistically are and where you want to be. And it applies to a coach. You can take that across any vocation. Where am I right now realistically, and then where do I want to be? And then what steps do I have to take? What changes do I have to make in order to get there? And realizing that that excellence is a process. It's not a destination. You don't just pull up and park yourself into excellence. It's something that requires daily attention and constant maintenance.
Excellence is a process. I absolutely love that. That's a t-shirt.
It's not a destination.
Not a destination. You just named our episode, which I love. I love when our guests do that. So good. I'm curious about this, because I've had the fortunate opportunity in the sports world to play on some championship winning teams. My sophomore year, my college team beat University of Minnesota, which is considered the biggest upset in college hockey. And then I worked at a company from an early stage to a multi-billion-dollar acquisition, and there were certain characteristics. It sounds crazy. One's a college hockey team, one's a company. There are certain characteristics in common with both organizations.
Mm-hmm.
You've coached a lot of teams, John. What are the characteristics and traits that you see on really successful, great teams? You know what I mean?
Right. I think number one, and I'm gonna give you the football coach answer, but number one's a good quarterback, right? You can't win consistently at in any really truly competitive league unless you've got a really good player at that position. And by that I mean, it starts with not beating yourself. So the guy doesn't have to have the greatest arm or be the most freakish athlete, but if he's a smart player, if he can play within his capabilities, and if he can not make mistakes and give the ball to the other team, and provide leadership, then that gives you a chance. The other thing I would say that talent in the National Football League, or really talent in any high performance endeavor, you can take that across any professional sports team or any highly competitive business. Talent is common. So, the best teams, the best businesses, they have conviction. That 2006 team that we mentioned in the opening of the Superdome, that's my favorite team. Not because it was the most talented, but it was we called it. We knew we were a collection of misfits, but that team came together to change the culture of the franchise. And it's not long ago, and I did this because I talked about that team in 2022 when I was at Iowa State, and I just put up logos of different organizations, and are these guys winners? Or are they losers? Right? We put up the Saints logo. The whole hand goes up, every hand in the room. They're winners, right? That wasn't the way it was prior to 2006. It was. They were the Aints. Now it's that nobody expected anybody from anything from New Orleans, but now they've, thanks to Sean Payton, Mickey Loomis, the fate of that and the expectations of that franchise did a complete 180. So again, it's culture. Again, we're looking at common characteristics, the ability to overcome adversity, because you're not going to go through life, you're not going to go through a season, you're not going to go through a game. Adversity is always lurking around the corner, and it's how are you going to handle it. And then, again, your reputation, how hard you work every day, and really committing yourself to the process of the things that you've outlined that are necessary to be successful and to give you the best opportunity to win on Sundays, because victory is never guaranteed. Nothing's guaranteed. The only guarantee in the NFL is there are no guarantees.
Yeah, yes, literally. That '06 team, though, was, I remember, I think you guys beat the Eagles in the divisional playoff. I was so
Correct.
happy. I hate the Eagles so much.
Yeah.
Oh,
You know,
that's
and
amazing.
to give you an idea how far things came, we traveled up to Chicago for the, for the NFC Championship, lost to the Bears, night game. The plane the tarmac's frozen, so the little tugboats that they use to pull the plane out of the parking lot spots, the wheels were spinning, so we sat on the plane for about 3.5 hours. We land in New Orleans it was after 1 a.m. and there was still 20 to 30,000 fans lining the streets there, coming out of the private airport to greet us when we got there. That's something that started probably about week 3 and just continually grew. But those folks stood out there, to welcome us home after a loss. And man, I still get goosebumps and I get choked up thinking about it.
So special, so special. So you mentioned Iowa State, which I think was your last coaching gig.
Mm-hmm.
How did this transition come up? How did it start? Was it planned?
No,
talk us through that transition.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I have great respect for Matt Campbell. Matt's last year at Toledo as head coach was my first year at Central Michigan. So, you go to the league meetings. I mean, Bonamego, Campbell, BC, they seat us alphabetically. We're seated next to each other. We happen to be on the same exact flight coming home from our first league meeting out in Arizona. We both had aisle seats and we're right across from each other. So, there was a friendship developed from mutual respect. And I had a year left on my contract with the Rams, and I had called Matt about another situation, and he came back to me about 2 days later and he said, would you consider coming to Iowa State? And that's kind of what led to it. It was a great role. I enjoyed it. It wasn't a great season. It was a young team, but made a lot of progress during there. I gained a lot of valuable friendships. Have several coaches, younger coaches that I like to believe I helped mentor, and I just really enjoyed being a part of that culture and what he's built there. They do it the right way. They know what they are, and they have a formula, and they don't deviate from that, and that's why they're successful, and that's why they'll continue to have success at Iowa State.
Amazing. And so after that year, you're like, all right, it's time to hang up the coaching whistle. What did that look like?
Scary, very scary, because you never really want to give it up. But at some point in time, the phone stops ringing, and I will say that on both sides of this, with the transition, ageism is very real. I don't feel old. I feel great. I feel like I'm at the top of my game. I know I could go back into the NFL right now and coach special teams if I wanted to, and do as good a job or better job than at least 75% of the guys that have those jobs right now. But I really enjoy my life right now. You mentioned that suitcase. That's not easy. Those things come at a cost. There's a price that's paid for that. I give my wife a tremendous amount of credit for putting up with me, number one. But when we change jobs, you get that call, you take the interview, you have less than 24 hours to make a decision, and then from there you're lucky if you have a week at home before you have to report, and then it falls on Mrs. Bonamego to, to schedule the movers, to get the house packed, to, get the kids' schools records, their medical records, all right, and then, packing the house, moving the house, everything from shutting off the electricity to having the mail forwarded to, updating the life insurance policies, you name it. There's so much involved in that. And, just in the NFL in 20 years, we did it 9 different times, right? So I give her a lot of credit for that. But back to your original question, it's scary, because you're looking at this and thinking, okay, what am I going to do now? And then what can I do now? The first thing I did, and again, this is why relationships are so important. And you need to be a relationship builder, but you also need to be, relationships require some maintenance. It's like buying a house. You don't just move in and then it's all over with. There's small things that you have to address from time to time, so that they don't become big issues. But if you build them the right way, I like to use the analogy of the light switch up in the attic. If it's wired the right way, in a friendship and a relationship is built the right way, you don't have to go up and test that switch every day to see if it's working. When you go up in the attic, as long as the bulb hasn't gone out, you flip that switch and you're going to be able to pick up right where you left off. So I guess where I'm going with all of this is I really tapped into, or tried to tap into, a lot of those friendships, relationships from the past. A lot of those, for me personally, were guys that I coached at West Point more than 25 years ago. If you were going to have access to a very highly successful, motivated group, that's them. So, and it wasn't like I was out of touch with a lot of those guys. There are a number of those players that I stayed in contact with over the years. So, what's available out there for me, what makes sense. That's kind of where I started. I wish that a little over a year ago I had known about your group, JR, because I think what you guys are doing and how you're doing it is outstanding. You're really, the platform that you provide, the training you provide is far and above better than anything I've ever seen. And I wish that I had known about it so that I could have taken advantage of it at that time. But it really, that's what it was. I was still actively considering coaching options, but at the same time, getting used to being on LinkedIn, applying for different positions, and then really trying to tap into that network to find out if anybody knew of anything that would be available for me, and that's really what led to the position that I currently have with BSN and business development.
Yep. We've helped a lot of coaches because, as you know, you mentioned the moving, but there's a lot more to that coaching grind that you didn't talk about, right?
Yep.
The number of hours you're putting in.
Sure.
I mean, you're living at the facility 10 months a year essentially. And even the 2 months that you're not living at the facility, that's normal hours for everybody else.
Right.
So it's crazy, but we see so much success with the coaches that come through our program. What do you think? Why do you think there's so many parallels between somebody with your pedigree that moves into a sales career? What are the characteristics that you think are paying off already as you've started this, and that you see being a huge tool for you moving forward?
That's a great question, and I think there are numerous, and I think that's why I think former athletes, former coaches can be very successful, will be very successful, and should be highly sought after. I'd start off with number one is the work ethic, which you mentioned. That's the basis for everything, right? I mean, if you don't have that, I mean, how can you expect to succeed in anything long term, or at least, you can't realistically expect to achieve a high level in anything if you don't have work ethic. The next thing I would say would just be the organization and the daily organization that you have to have in order to be a coach. I think the competitive nature, if we're involved in athletics, we're inherently competitive. I think the ability to teach enables you to create a vision where your ability to share your vision and really create a story. If you're in sales, I think, if you've been a college coach, if you've been a high school coach, you've had to recruit. There's a certain amount of recruiting and selling that you have to do, even as a professional coach. But, recruiting is the same as sales. And I always felt like when I went into a prospect's home or when I got them on the telephone, the first thing I wanted to do was establish a rapport. I wanted to sell myself. And if I believed in my product, which I always did, which was the institution, the program, if I believed in that and if I could develop trust, sell myself, develop a relationship, find out what was important to that prospect and show them how my institution, how I could help fill those needs, that's exactly what sales is. Again, you're selling yourself. You have a product, you believe in your product, and you find a way to show that customer how this product can benefit them. Those are exact parallels. You might be selling a different thing. You're selling playing time, education, opportunity, opportunities after graduation, etc. But it's all sales. It's the same thing.
I could not agree more. I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, coaching is selling, right? You're motivating, influencing, and persuading people to take action. Whatever the action might not be to sign a purchase agreement or whatever, but it's the same, contextually the same thing. So good. John, you've given us a lot of time. We always ask these final two questions to every guest. The first one, and I know you're still early, but I feel like you're getting your arms around this. What do you love about sales so far? Like what's really resonating with you?
Again, I kind of try to equate it to back to sports. So when I'm able to bring a new client on, and in business development, that's my role, is to introduce a potential client to BSN and what we can offer them. That's a win. So anytime I can bring somebody into, and when they've placed their first order with us, that's a win. Now, I'm not getting commission, but I still feel like that's a victory. And then just being there, this Pro Select branch that I'm really essentially in charge of is kind of a concierge service. So anytime I can help somebody, there's been a lot of satisfying moments for me in terms of like working with former players that are donating back to, we had one player that donated back to an entire youth league in his hometown, helmets and shoulder pads. So it really, to me, wasn't about the sale. It was about the fact that I was helping this player give back to his community and say thank you and helping future generations of young football players. Those are the things that I've found that have been the most satisfying and what I love about my current job.
Amazing, so good. Sales is service. Like, that's just to be clear. You're in service to others. You're there to help them solve problems and achieve goals, just like a coach does.
Yes,
right?
Yeah. Yep.
All right, last one. So when I first started my company, I used to get a lot of questions from people like, JR, how come you're focusing on just athletes and just veterans? And my answer, and obviously this has evolved, but at the core, this is my belief, is I don't have to explain to an athlete, to a coach, to somebody who served in the military what it means to be dialed in. And that's what you need to be, if you want to be a successful salesperson, you got to be dialed in, blinders on, locked in, right? So I guess for the question that we always ask is what does it mean to be dialed in to you as a sales professional specifically?
Yeah, I would say being dialed in is the same as I was as a coach, and the same thing I expected from my players. Being dialed in to me means you're process driven. Part of that means you're prepared, and that's how your process leads. Preparation is part of your process, and confidence comes with preparation. So that's how I would define being dialed in.
Confidence, and by the way, like to the point you made earlier on, conviction. Conviction comes from preparation. Conviction and confidence. So that's nail on the head, man. Nice little bow tie on the episode right there.
Appreciate it. I love
it.
Yep. Thank you.
Coach Bono, thank you so much for joining us, man. This is #required listening for our audience. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate being here, JR. It's been a great time.
This wraps up this episode of Merchants of Change. If you enjoyed this episode, the most meaningful way to say thanks is to submit a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're interested in working with us, please come find us at www.shiftgroup.io.